Welcome back to the Football Fellowship podcast. Going into the international break, there's only one place to take a look at this week, and that is at the top of the Premier League table. Liverpool sitting pretty on 18 points after 7 games under new manager Arne Slot. And Mev, as a Liverpool fan, how have you found the season so far?
I found it really, really good, really enjoyable, and I'm excited from what I've seen so far this season. I think, obviously, I hate the fact that I still mention him, but it's hard not to, because after Jurgen Klopp left, I was a little bit worried. I was like, okay, new manager coming in, how's he going to adapt to the Premier League? What's he going to make of the squad? And I think from what I've seen so far, I've been really impressed by him and also the players as well, of how they've adapted to his style of play. I think the one credit I can give to him is that he's not tried to be Jurgen Klopp. He's tried to be himself. He is Arne Slot. He's not as flamboyant and boisterous. He's more cool, calm, and collected. And I think that actually helped the fact that he's his own man, and we've got an identifiable figure, but a different one to Jurgen Klopp, because I think that helps us fall in love with him rather than an idea of what Jurgen Klopp could be like, because no one could be like him. And in terms of the football, the style of play, I think it's more, instead of heavy metal football, it's more controlled. I think it's more possession based, and I think it's more about unlocking the door rather than knocking the door down. I think, if that's a fair enough analogy. And I think so far this season, while the fixtures maybe, yes, have been on the kinder side, I think that Liverpool have also done their part in making them look like easy fixtures. And if it wasn't just for that one slip against Nottingham Forest, then I think this would have been an absolutely perfect start. But if you offered me this at the start of the season, I would have absolutely taken it. What have you made of it, Toby?
Yeah, I think, like you said, that sort of change of style of play is pretty clear from both the tactics and sort of the stats when you look into them, that you're now lining up in a sort of more clear 4-2-3-1 as opposed to the 4-3-3 that we came so used to under Jurgen Klopp. And we've certainly seen some players thrive in that system, which we'll touch on. And yeah, and statistically as well, like you said, more about control. It's a lot less sort of high attacking third, tackles and interceptions, a lot more sort of sitting back, winning that ball low, and then building up slowly through the middle, through that different structure. And in that 4-2-3-1, yeah, certainly some players who have thrived in there. And I think the main one that everyone seems to be talking about at the moment is Gravenberch, who came in and maybe didn't have an immediate impact, but there was always talent there, I think we could see, and didn't quite shine as brightly as he could at Bayern. But yeah, start of this season, I think we're finally seeing that talent that we all heard and saw about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I didn't know he had this in him. I thought, obviously, he's a very talented player, but I thought most of his best work was done in the final third. But as we've seen so far this season, that, in the double pivot. And it's interesting, actually, his position, because if you look at Liverpool's average positions at the end of a game, Alexis Mac Allister, who's alongside him, who I think has been very underrated so far this season and actually has been a crucial part of the midfield and helping Gravenberch, he's actually sometimes even deeper than Gravenberch, because I think one thing that catches a lot of people's eyes in the highlights especially is when a ball gets played to Gravenberch, he just drops a shoulder, lets the ball roll past him, and then he's away and running at the defence. And he's only able to do that because Mac Allister is making himself an option sometimes even deeper than he is. So, and I think that gets overlooked and sometimes isn't highlighted as being as important as it actually is. And so I think this ability of him to both be a physical presence as a 6, receive the ball off the back line as well, but then also drive with the ball as an 8, makes him the perfect, well-rounded player to play in this Arne Slot system. And it's when you look at someone like a Martin Zubimendi, who Liverpool were heavily linked with and tried to sign in the summer, it didn't quite work out because, he preferred the Spanish mountains than the sights of Liverpool, then it is one where you kind of think, like, was he actually the right type of profile? Was he more of a 6 picking the ball out of defence and playing it? Would it meant that Liverpool were maybe playing a bit more of a 4-3-3 if he joined Liverpool? So it's an interesting one because you don't know how things could have worked. Are Liverpool playing more the 4-2-3-1 because they don't have a natural 6 in the way Arne Slot wants? Or is this evolution of Gravenberch a short-term fix? Is it a long-term fix? I'm not quite sure, actually. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because do you think Gravenberch is a player who, well, obviously he's immensely talented, but do you think this is something that you can see him doing long-term, and this is something that you can see him excelling in? Or do you think Liverpool do actually need to find a defensive midfielder, a proper one?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I think you haven't quite been tested necessarily on the defensive side. I think it's fair to say. I think you've only conceded 2 goals and you've got 5 clean sheets, and your defence has been really good. But I think in that middle third of the pitch, I think Gravenberch and McAllister complement each other really well. Gravenberch obviously carrying, like you said, and McAllister being more sort of a passer. I think is a nice combination, but I think both of them are not the strongest defensively. I think in terms of sort of reading the game in the space when someone's attacking you. So I don't think I could see either of them playing as a sole 6. So I think playing them as a double pivot works really, really well. And I think if you are playing them together in that double pivot, you don't necessarily need someone like Zubimendi, who is going to be sort of sitting back a lot deeper, picking up the ball and also reading and intercepting any opposition attacks. So yeah, I think, like you said, I think it probably was almost a fix for maybe not having a naturally super defensive number 6 that you could play on their own, fitting them both in. But I mean, it's worked really, really well. So like you said, you don't necessarily need one if they're going to be carrying on playing this system. I think if it does evolve into a system where you're going to be playing 4-3-3 with 1 6 and 2 8s, you could have Gravenberch and McAllister or Soboslai as the 8s on one side. And I do still think you would need a 6, but the way you've been playing in this system, it's definitely not needed.
Yeah, and I completely agree on that. And I want to praise Arne Slot for doing that, because obviously he's coming from the Eredivisie, and playing managing a club like Liverpool, it's at a completely different level. The eyeballs that are on you week in, week out, the amount of press that's on you, and I think he's handled it all really, really well. And I think tactically he's done a fantastic job as well. I think probably Liverpool have been tested too much in terms of injuries as well so far this season. And I actually was thinking about it myself, and I thought, under Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool picked up a lot of injuries, specifically muscle injuries. The likes of hamstrings and quads and calves were all going left, right and centre. And sometimes Liverpool were playing, with bare bones. If you think about that League Cup final against Chelsea, Klopp's kids won it for him. But you do think that, maybe because Liverpool are more controlled in possession, maybe an added benefit is the fact that maybe they won't pick up as many injuries. And if that is to be the case, then I think that'd be a welcome benefit, actually. So far this season, I think only Harvey Elliott has picked up an injury, unfortunately. I think he missed from the September international break, and he should maybe be back in contention after this October one. You do also look at Alisson Becker, who, it is quite annoying how you have the best goalkeeper in the league and arguably in world football, and then his hamstrings are made out of cheese. It is so typical Liverpool in that sense. But then also Alexis McAllister picked up an injury against Crystal Palace on the last day before the international break as well. So I think when Liverpool's best players are out, then obviously any team in football is going to miss their best players. But I think how well will Arne Slot cope with that and rotate? That's something which we haven't seen just yet, because he has so far this season taken off a lot of the attackers, taken off full-backs in games. He hasn't rotated his midfield too much. Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister have been very much the first choice midfield 3, and the ones who have started and played the majority of minutes so far, along with the likes of Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk. So how it goes into this busy period and the winter period as well after the November international break is going to be a real test. And I think Liverpool do have the squad for it. It's just if they get the luck with injuries, and if they do, then they could be around there. They could be around first or second. I want to be a bit pessimistic because I don't want to put too much pressure, because I think that it's been such a great start. But I do think that there is something. You can tangibly feel that they have the quality of players. They potentially have the depth as well. But it is still just a little bit too early to say, I think, for sure, if I think they're going to be in the title race or not.
Yeah, like you touching on the squad there is really interesting, because I think the backup options you have, especially in the attacking line, is really, really beneficial when they're all fit, because I think the players that you have sort of waiting in the wings are quite different to the ones that we sort of see starting normally. Obviously, the lineup at the moment is looking like Jota, Diaz and Salah, who have all had really, really good starts to the season. Diaz especially, 5 goals and an assist, looking really good. And then you look at those options on the bench in terms of Cody Gakpo, Darwin Núñez and Federico Chiesa, and it feels like all 3 of those bench options bring something slightly different to each other and something slightly different to the attackers that we see on the pitch, which I think the impact as subs or rotation players is really, really good. The only issue I think potentially could be because of those differences, if we do see an injury to one of those starting Liverpool attackers, having to try and bring in a personnel who's slightly different into a system that feels quite well defined at the moment could potentially cause a few little hiccups, especially if it is someone like Mo Salah, having to bring in Chiesa, who hasn't played loads of football, or shifting Diaz over to the right hand side where he hasn't necessarily played great when he has done for Liverpool could cause some issues. But as you said, I think with that change in terms of intensity of pressing, hopefully, especially for the Liverpool front line, there should be less injuries and that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, you'd hope so. I will say though, the fact that you look at all the attacking options Liverpool have, you'd probably think of them as being one of the highest scorers in the league, and obviously they are. But it's not as free flowing in terms of the goals in the league. I mean, they've only scored. I mean, I say only. I mean, this is in comparison to the other top teams in the league, I should say. They've only scored 13 goals so far this season from 7 games. And when you, like you mentioned, the likes of Salah, Jota, Diaz, Gakpo, Nunes, Chiesa, think about Szoboszlai also playing in a more advanced midfield position. You think about the centre-backs they will have and the ability they have to score from corners, and the high-flying full-backs of Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold. 13 is a number you probably say is one you'd expect on average from the amount of games, but they haven't been free flowing. They have been in the Champions League, obviously, where they scored 3 against AC Milan, and in the League Cup when they scored 5 against West Ham United. But yeah, in the league, I have seen them being a little bit more cautious, and I think that is coming from the style of play because it's more about the slow build up, and sometimes I do think that there isn't enough urgency at times. I do think of that Nottingham Forest game, which is the only outlier, I should say, from otherwise a flawless start of the season, where I did think, like, okay, when are we going to be knocking that door down? When are we banging that door down? And that emphasis didn't really ever come. It really just, it was a bit slow. It was a bit like, okay, come on, we're going to carry on doing what we're doing, which I don't think is the worst idea ever. I think sometimes changing what the game plan is sometimes a detriment to the attack, but I did see more of an urgency under Jurgen Klopp, and that's something that maybe as a Liverpool fan I'm just gonna have to get used to. But yeah, I did expect maybe a couple more goals from the likes of Salah so far this season, who I think has been really good, but maybe not world class. I hesitate to criticize because obviously he has been a world class player for the last like 7 seasons, but I did expect a couple more goals. And once you come against strong opposition, as Liverpool will be doing in the coming weeks, I think that'll be the true test after the October international break. Is that how you see it as well for Liverpool? Because I think the fixtures coming up, they're really, really tough.
Yeah, I think in terms of the title race, whether we see Liverpool as real contenders up there with Man City and Arsenal, who I think we could say are definite title contenders this season based on the last couple of seasons, and Liverpool I think are definitely in that conversation at the moment. But yeah, from the 20th of October to the 7th of December, that's when they've got this batch of fixtures, Liverpool, where the real test begins. And as you said, with Salah hoping to get a few more goals, I think especially when you look at the fixtures that Liverpool have had, you would probably agree with that. You're obviously looking at Palace, Wolves, Bournemouth, Forest, United. Potentially should have been the most difficult fixture in there and probably turned out to be the easiest for Liverpool. And then Brentford and Ipswich as well. That I think if you could have 7 fixtures to start the season, it wouldn't look too different to that. But yeah, these next fixtures over the next month and a half, just going to read them very quickly because it is a crazy run. Chelsea, Leipzig, Arsenal, Brighton twice in a row, Leverkusen, Villa, Southampton is a nice little one in there. Then you've got Real Madrid, City, Newcastle and Everton, and both of those Newcastle and Everton games at the end away as well. As I said, with those first 7 fixtures, probably couldn't look too different if you wanted a great set of fixtures to have. If you wanted a tough spell, it couldn't really get much tougher than that.
Yeah, and I know you stopped at Everton, but I'll add Girona away in the Champions League as well, because I just think that Liverpool in the Champions League will always be a priority for the club as well, and they'll always take it seriously. So I'll add Girona on the end of that as well. But yeah, it is an absolutely crazy schedule. And I was actually having this thought when I was talking to a mate who's a Liverpool fan, because he's offered me his ticket to go watch Brighton at home in the league. And I was thinking about it because there's been a discussion around Liverpool fans at the moment about the atmosphere at Anfield. And I wonder if there is maybe an expectation that's been left from Jurgen Klopp's era that Liverpool are expected to win games of football. I think maybe the style of football isn't, all blood and thunder, so therefore the fans are maybe expecting the team to, go for it and they don't, and that kind of brings the noise down. But I also think the fact that there's maybe a little bit of fatigue as well with the Champions League fixtures, the extra two fixtures, and the fact that Liverpool are in the League Cup as well, that, my mate's offering me a Liverpool ticket because he's like, oh, there's too many games and I can't go. And maybe there's, I don't know, it just made me think like you wouldn't normally be offering me a game for a league game. And I just thought, that's interesting. So, yeah, I think undoubtedly, I think the Liverpool players will be very high on adrenaline during this run. I think they're going to have to be to get through it. I think, touch wood, that Liverpool are going to have to be very lucky with injuries because, you lose. Like, you lose Alisson Becker. You lose Alisson Becker, and Arne Slot's come out and say, looks like a bad one. He might not be there for till at least the November international break. And then you're thinking, well, those are some big games of football. I mean, if you lose a couple in the Champions League, especially with this league format, then you could find yourself not automatically qualifying. You could find yourself out of the League Cup. All of a sudden, from top of the league, you find yourself back in the race for top four. It's going to be tough. But what I will say is it's going to be tough for every team because every team, in terms of Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Villa, they're all going to have to come up against these teams in the Premier League and in the Champions League. So there is that one caveat, but to have them all back to back to back, if Liverpool were to pick up a few key injuries now, I think this would be the worst time during the season just because of the fixture difficulty. And I think, yeah, if Liverpool were to lose, I'd say one of the midfielders. I'd say if Liverpool were to lose one of the midfielders because they haven't had stellar injury records, especially, and considering the amount of minutes they played so far this season, plus the fact that they're all playing for their national sides as well because McAllister's Argentina, Sabosai's Hungary, and Gravenberch is the Netherlands. They all play in the midfield for the countries as well. I am looking at this like, right, our season will be defined by this period, and it is so early on, but I think maybe I should be looking a little bit excited as well because there are some really tasty fixtures. I mean, Real Madrid at home, Bayer Leverkusen at home with Xabi Alonso. I think as a fan competing for the Champions League and Premier League, these are fixtures that I should be excited for, but I'm also worried there might be a huge reality check. So, yeah, how I don't know. Is it fair to ask you, how do you think Liverpool are going to get on? I mean, I don't even, what do you even expect from this? Can you even put a points tally on these difficult fixtures, or is it just get through them and still be in the running for the top 8 of the Champions League and still be in and around Arsenal and sitting in the league? I mean, what on earth can you expect from Liverpool here, Tobes?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to look at it as a whole. I think with games of this sort of size and difficulty, you do really have to look at them game by game and just go one at a time. I think that first game against Chelsea, obviously at Anfield, is going to be a big game. Back off the international break, both sides have been on a good run of form, which may potentially have been halted a little by the timing of this international break. And I think that is the game where we're really going to see who is potentially going to be that third and or fourth team sort of going in for the title. Chelsea, I think, have a lot to prove, obviously, off the back of last season. That'll be a huge statement win if they can get it. And Liverpool, if they want to start this really difficult fixture run and cement themselves as in that title race as well, then they could do with a really confident win as well. So I think yeah, it's one at a time. And for me, yeah, that Chelsea game, I think, being the first one, is really going to set up sort of the next month or so of the Premier League and see who is going to be in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, what I will say is if Liverpool during this run were to drop points, then I think it would add pressure onto the other games. And I'm looking at Southampton away after the first game after the November international break. If Liverpool have a poor run in October, and then you look at that Southampton game and you go, okay, you know what, that's a game which you would be guaranteed to get 3 points. You have to get 3 points from that. All of a sudden, that adds an extra added pressure to that. So I don't think you can really be saying in this run that, this game's 3 points, this game's 1, this game's, you have to win in the Champions League. I think it's just about, like you said, taking game by game, assessing the damage after everyone and just seeing who's ready to go again. And Liverpool are definitely going to need their squad during this period of time. And Yeah, good luck to them, because I think they're probably going to be the talk of most weekends after on the Monday, sorry, after weekends, because yeah, some of those games are tasty. But instead of talking about Liverpool at the top, should we talk about Wolverhampton Wanderers at the very, very bottom, who, after 7 games, have only got 1 point. Yes, they've had a tough run of fixtures, but there are some worrying signs for Wolves. Is that fair to say, Tobes?
Yeah, it's a really strange one with Wolves at the moment. They obviously the points and the results and their league position does look really worrying, especially coming off a decent last season, quite inconsistent at times, but there were some really good shining moments in there. Going into this new season, I think before the sale of Pedro Neto, there was a bit of optimism. I think they were definitely a team to keep an eye on for this season. And yeah, 1 point, 20th place, 21 goals conceded after 7 games, so an average of 3 a game is worrying in itself. And I've tried to look into Wolves. I've seen a few of their games this season, tried to look into the stats and see what the difference is, what seems to be going wrong. And I can't really see it just in at the moment. It's their attacking numbers are almost identical, the same as their possession and passing percentages and stats. And even their defensive numbers are almost the same in terms of their tackles and interceptions, and the amount of shots that they're facing isn't too dissimilar. It's a really, really weird one with Wolves, and looking at it in terms of stats, it doesn't seem too worrying and seems that they may be able to turn it around. But when you're sitting bottom of the table after 7 games on a point, there must be something pretty bad going wrong. And I'm sure they're going to be able to find it a lot better than I am sitting here looking at the computer. But I think they've got to turn it around pretty quick, haven't they? Otherwise, it could go from kind of worrying to pretty worrying.
Yeah, I've been trying to look at the games and keep a close eye on them. And one that obviously really stands out is obviously the Chelsea one, because they conceded 6 in that game. And you can maybe brush it aside and go, do you know what, that's an outlier. But then in the last game, they conceded 5 to Brentford. And then you go, well, actually, is there some sort of a pattern going on here? And I've been trying to figure it out myself and trying to put my finger on it. And I've been seeing Wolves playing with this back four. And, this. I'm just chucking it out there, really, if I'm being honest, as a potential solution rather than with any real conviction behind it. But I do look at Wolves and I just think that, you know what, maybe they would be better reverting back to a back five, just because if you look at the players they have available, I mean, Semedo and Ryan Nori are perfect wing backs to be playing right and left wing back for them. And if you think about a a centre back partnership with a three, you maybe can have Craig Dawson in the middle if everyone is fit. By the way, Craig Dawson in the middle, Bueno on the right of that, and then maybe Toddy Gomez on the left of that. And you think to yourself, yeah, that looks like a really solid back five. And then if you maybe have, I don't know, Lamina, Gomez, oh god, who else? You got Andre, Tommy Doyle, and have like a couple of midfielders just in front of them. You think to yourself, with that midfield defense plus Sam Johnston, who seems to be the preferred number one ahead of Jose Sa, you think to yourself, you know what? That is a really, really solid defense and spine of a team as well, with the likes of Strand Larson, Cunha, Huang up front, and a team who should be difficult to beat, should be hard to come up against, and will cause you a lot of trouble. And nothing, really, just absolutely nothing. They're looking good for going forward. 9 goals from 7 games. I think that's not been a worry so far. I will say that maybe they're lacking a bit of pace, and it does seem like Ryan Nori is getting in the attacking positions from left back. But really, do you want your left back to be the most attacking threat you have? Not really. That's kind of a recipe for disaster and showing that you're not really doing well. But yeah, it's not been good. And the only thing that I can say is the fact that they've had the most difficult fixtures I think of any other team in the league. In my opinion, I think they've played no one in the bottom 9 in the league, so everyone has been in the top 11. And it's such a strange one, because even though they had a tough fixture, I expected them to do better. We really liked Wolves last season, 14th in the league last year. I expected them to do better.
Yeah, and I think that change from the back three to the back four is obviously trying to trying to progress their play style, trying to step things up to get them more towards sort of comfortably mid-table instead of away from relegation. It seems to have done the opposite. And I think bringing that in with this really difficult fixture, and obviously Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa and Liverpool, the really, really tough fixtures in there, is, I think that change of system, obviously it's got to start at the start of the season. But I think like you said, I think if they would have started the season again with a back three, back five, it would have made these fixtures a little bit easier for them, picked up a few more points. And then even then, in all these tough fixtures, they scored in all of them, apart from the first game of the season against Arsenal, where they didn't. And even then, they still created a good few chances for themselves. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe over this international break, they may revert back to a back three where they're a little bit more comfortable. And again, yeah, there just doesn't really seem like too much specific to change. The only thing I noticed, and it just reminded me after you said, obviously about Sam Johnston being choice over Jose Sarr, his numbers look really poor when compared to last season. Last season, Wolves as a squad, their post-shot expected goal, so the quality of the shots and how likely they are to go in once they have been taken, obviously in terms of expecting what the goalkeeper's going to save. Last season per game, they were preventing 0.2. This season per game, they're letting in 0.67 goals more per game than they should based on the quality of the shot. And another one to back that up, save percentage. This season's only 56%. Last year it was 72%. And both of those numbers up for Wolves are the lowest in the league this season. And if they had those numbers last season as well, they would also be the lowest. So I'm not sure if that's teams are getting a little bit lucky, Sam Johnston maybe not saving some of the easier shots, but even then in terms of his performances, he's still making a good number of saves, and I think he still is also definitely not a bad keeper, and I don't think he can solely be to blame, but looking at those numbers, there must be something going on either with the shots that are coming up against them, maybe teams are finding it easier to create higher quality chances against them, or there is something potentially an issue with Sam Johnston, and maybe a change to Jose Sarr could be a potential fix and get those goals conceded down a little bit, because it's far too much at the moment.
Yeah, I think when you're a goalkeeper near the bottom of the league and you're getting peppered by shots, eventually you are going to let a couple in that you probably should have done better with. But I think the amount of goals they conceded, I think he does need a little bit of help from the players in front of him. And also, if you bring in Sam Johnston and put him immediately as number one, you push Jose Sarr to the side, and then you go, well, hang on, actually, new signing Johnson, you're going to go on the bench now. Sarr, you're going to come back in. Well, I don't know. It just doesn't. You can do it, obviously, if that's for the best of the team and you need that to improve your results, and absolutely do it. But it doesn't look good looking from the outside, I suppose. But I think they need results, so it doesn't really matter if that was what Gary Neville decides to do. But then when you also mentioned bringing Sam Johnston in, I also did think to myself the players that left Wolves over the summer. And I thought, yeah, Pedro Neto was really important for them, but he only played 20 games last season in the league for them, so he wasn't necessarily fit. But I do think that maybe that his ability with the ball, his dribbling, his ball carrying ability, and maybe helping to relieve the pressure off the defence by getting them further up the pitch, maybe that could have helped, and maybe that's something that they're missing. But I just think that with the players like Hwang, Bellegarde, even Aït-Nouri again from left back, I think they've been doing that okay. I think also you look at Max Kilman, and I've been saying, like, you know what, I think 40 million for Max Kilman was a slight overpay from West Ham considering his age, and I think the Wolves were good. They should have sold him for that money. I'm now looking at the defence and thinking maybe, yeah, as a player he's probably worth that much, maybe not worth that much, but maybe for this Wolves side he was more crucial than it first appeared, perhaps. Because I think if you look about him and Craig Dawson, and you think about the rest of the options, and then you think to yourself, yeah, they're all really talented players. I've got no issue with them as players, but sometimes they just don't gel as a partnership, as a centre-back partnership, and you need that one stable person just to order them around. He was also the captain as well. So maybe it's a combination of everything as a whole, and plus the poor fixtures, plus also maybe the fact that the players might be having a bad run of form themselves collectively, and when you have some of your best players collectively having a bad run of form, then you can do as well. I, despite the fact that they're bottom of the league, I actually am not too worried. Obviously, I am a little bit worried, and I think that's fair to say because, bottom of the league, 1 point after 7, 21 goals conceded. That's abysmal, really. But I do think that the fixtures coming up are turning a little bit. They are going to get a little bit easier. They got Manchester City at home, which is a game actually they won last season, and then Brighton and Hove Albion away. But then after that, they got the likes of Crystal Palace, Southampton, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester. So I do think they'll probably be fine. It is maybe just because of the fact that Wolves did well last season that my expectations were that they would, despite the difficult fixtures, they would at least pick up a win this season.
Yeah, and obviously talking mainly about their defence there, you mentioned the Chelsea result, obviously conceding 6, and at the weekend just gone conceding 5 against Brentford. It'd be good to touch on Brentford briefly as well. And I guess how did you see that game? Do you think it was Wolves particularly being bad and carrying on their poor form, or do you think it was more down to how well Brentford are playing, how well Bryan Mbuemo is playing, or is it, as it normally is, a little bit of a combination of both?
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of both. I think that it was just the perfect match for Brentford at this time because the side who were doing well in form come against a side who are low in confidence, and after the previous losses probably had more pressure on this game to go out there and get a result. I think Wolves didn't deliver. I think Brentford were really, really good, and I think Thomas Frank doesn't get anywhere near as much credit as he deserves because of the fact that he's with Brentford when they're in the Championship. He's come up to the Premier League, and I often think that if you're a manager lower down the table and if you want to make a jump to a bigger club, it's probably best to do it sooner rather than later. Do it after maybe 18 months to 2 years before people maybe associate you too much with one club, or maybe they get bored of you a bit too easily. I think Thomas Frank, because Brentford have been in the league now for, I think, what's it been, 4 seasons now, I think Thomas Frank is associated with Brentford. He's iconic with Brentford. Whereas if it is after 2 seasons he were to leave, I think his career could have gone very, very different. I think I compare him maybe to a bit like Mauricio Pochettino, who's only at Southampton for about 18 months before he made the jump to Spurs. But I do think that he's a very slept-on manager, Thomas Frank, and I think that I think he's a fantastic manager, and I think that you never doubt Brentford, but I think more important than that, you never doubt Thomas Frank because, he is destined for better things eventually. No offense, Brentford fans, but I think that, he is the key for Brentford doing well, in my opinion.
Yeah, because last season with Brentford, it was looking a little bit shaky at times. They were right down in that relegation fight, and I think going into this season, they did have to improve on a decent number of things in their game to really step it up. Otherwise, again, they could have been down there with the newly promoted sides. And it seems this season they have really, really worked on it over the summer, and they've really increased their efficiency, I think, is one aspect of their game that seems to have skyrocketed. I mean, looking at their numbers there, all of their percentage stats have gone up from last season. Their dual win rates, their pass completion in almost all areas of the pitch, their shots on target percentage has all gone up, and it really does feel like, even though they might not necessarily be creating much more or doing much more, when they're getting in those important positions, their decision making and their effectiveness in those positions has been superb. And I think that's really clear to see in terms of the 4 games in a row now where they've scored. Obviously, we had the 3 in a row in the first minute and the one at the weekend in the second minute of the game. Just shows when they're getting those chances, no matter how early in the game it is, they seem to be taking them. And that is led by the main man, Bryan Mbuemo, at the moment, who 6 goals from an XG of under 3, no assists, but an expected assist of 2. So, could have even had better numbers than he is already. And he seems, I know we said it last season, but he really does seem to have stepped up in the absence of Tony. And almost at times they feel like a very different side. And I think this season especially, maybe last season, they were found out a little bit in terms of their tactics and their long ball and hold up and then bringing the wingers in. I think the way they've had to adapt their game has made a big difference, and they feel like a different side, and I think that's all for the positive.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think that they were primed towards the back end of last season to make this jump, to play a bit more attractive football, and I think Bryan Mbuemo has been at the absolute heart of it. I mean, the fact that he's still only 25, he only just recently turned 25 as well, despite the fact that maybe because he's bald, he looks a little bit older. But yeah, I think how he is really, really good. And I remember seeing this when it was linked that Liverpool might lose Mohamed Salah to the Saudi Pro League last summer, not the summer just gone, but the summer before that in 2023. And he was a name that got linked with Liverpool. And a lot of people lost their heads. And, I wasn't too keen on him myself, if I'm being perfectly honest about it. But I think last season showed me that, he is a really, really good player. And sometimes you forget how young he is as well, because, you don't often Google the age of Premier League players, do you? It's not something that people often do. But when you look at him, you just think he's got absolutely everything to his game. He's got that aerial threat as well for someone who is, maybe 5'10" and playing out on the wing. He's got that as well. He's got that killer instinct in front of goal, which he is sharpening week in, week out. And I think to myself that, if, maybe a bit controversially, but if Liverpool were to sell Mohamed Salah, if they were to bring in Bryan Mbuemo, I don't think that would be the end of the world.
I think it'd be a more affordable, sort of low risk option, and he might take, I think, a bit of time to adjust to sort of a more possession based style of play. Someone where he can hold the ball a little bit more. But I think, as you said, with him being young, left footed, and a really good finisher, he is a very sort of similar profile, I guess, to Salah.
Yeah, I do think that Bryan Mbuemo is probably the next one out of Brentford. I mean, first it was David Raya, then it was Ivan Toney. I do think Mbuemo is the next one. What I would find interesting is how Brentford try and replace Mbuemo, because I do think they have been stripped of a little bit of talent in the last few years, and I don't think that, yes, they've got some very exciting young players in the attacking areas, like the likes of Kevin Schade, Keane Lewis-Potter, Fabio Carvalho, which they funnily enough did sign from Liverpool this summer. But I do think that, they can't afford to keep selling the best players and not producing the next one. I don't know who that next one quite is in the attacking forward line for Brentford, and I think that if Bremen was to go, I think you're talking about players who are pivotal for their team and the success of their team. Is there a player who's more crucial to a team's success than Mbuemo is to Brentford? Because without Mbuemo, are Brentford even, relegation candidates, potentially?
I mean, yeah, certainly without his goals, to have 6 goals in 7 games this early, I think just shows that, they are pretty reliant on him. I think they lost him last season a bit through, was that the injury or AFCON? I can't remember which it was in the end. And they were able to deal with it. And I think if it was a different side apart from Brentford, I would say yes. But I think just the way that Brentford play, the way they set up, and having Thomas Frank, I think their ability to adapt to losing players and to change, it doesn't really ever feel like a massive loss, I think, if a player is out for injury or a tournament, or if a player is sold, especially in the case with Ivan Toney. I think they are a side that can easily adapt their play, even if they don't get a direct replacement, to not feel like they miss that play. I think there's a few clubs like that as well, like Brighton, I think is exactly one, where I think all of the coaching staff, and obviously De Zerbi last season, Hertzler this season, I think they have a setup at the club where they can adapt really, really easily. So yeah, you would think that Mbuemo is probably Brentford's most important player. I think that sort of distance between second most and most important player for Brentford is the biggest. But I think it would maybe be a little bit of a disservice to say that Brentford are reliant on him just based on the few last seasons, because there's certainly some other players where I think if you take them out of a side, then the team does drop a little bit more maybe than Mbuemo would for Brentford.
Well, I've only just remembered the fact that, because I've forgotten about him because he's out injured, but Johan Wieser is also there at Brentford too. I also think is another top forward. But go on then, let's explore it a little bit, because if you were to take one player out of a side, what would be the biggest drop-off? Because Mbuemo is definitely there for Brentford. My mind immediately goes to Cole Palmer at Chelsea. Yeah, are they as much of a cohesive unit if they get rid of him? I am then thinking, I don't know, actually. I was thinking maybe Aston Villa with Ollie Watkins, but then I thought, well, you got John Duran.
John Duran's there waiting in the wings. Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah, fantastic form. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Spurs and Mickey van der Ven, because no other player can offer as much. Anyone that comes to mind for you from the other sides?
couple players in the Newcastle side. I think maybe if Newcastle were to lose Joelinton, I think we saw that last season, and Bruno Guimaraes. I think those two players are so important to how Newcastle plays, and I think if one goes, the replacements that would come in aren't great, and I think they lose a lot of what makes that Newcastle midfield good. So I think either of those are very important players for Newcastle. Probably Saka at Arsenal as well, just for the consistency and creativity, and again, I think the backups to Saka, the drop off is pretty big on that right hand side, pretty reliant on him. But yeah, I think the one that really does come to mind first, like you said, is Cole Palmer, just because of how good he is, and that's it. Yeah, just how good he is, just shows. I think if he was in any side, losing him is a huge loss, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the league table now, and I'm just trying to think. I'm looking at the bottom, and I think Crystal Palace, if they were to lose Eberechi Eze, I think that'd be a massive blow. I'm looking at Everton, and I'm thinking maybe Dominic Calvert-Lewin, maybe Branthwaite, but also maybe Dwight McNeil with how well he's doing at the moment. I'm trying to think of players who aren't goalkeepers, because I think obviously losing a first-choice goalkeeper will cause a lot of issues.
Big loss, isn't it?
I think maybe Leicester with Jamie Vardy as a shout.
Potentially, yeah.
I don't know who else. And then, to be fair, I was just above Leicester, I was looking at Man United and I was like, they could lose anyone and they'll still be as badly as they are now.
But there's probably a couple they could lose and they'd be better, so
yeah,
it's the other way.
Well, should we talk about them then? Because, yeah, the vultures are definitely circling around Erik Ten Hag at the moment, I think it's fair to say. 0-0 draw against Aston Villa on the weekend, the 3-3 draw against Porto in the Europa League as well. Not quite the defeats that people were maybe expecting, and maybe even the Ineos group at Man United were expecting. And so it looks like Erik Ten Hag may be staying for now. Oh, it's such a tough one, because would you say that Erik Ten Hag is Man United's biggest problem at the moment?
I don't know. For me, it is between... I think it's a combination of him and the players. I don't think any of the players are performing well at all, sort of individually. I mean, there's no player for them at the moment who's got more than one goal in the league or who's got more than one assist in the league. They look sluggish, they look unmotivated, and I think you could quite easily say that the players are the problem at Man United at the moment, but I think the parts of where the players are struggling are things that a manager could potentially fix. I think better coaching, better motivation, better drive, some more excitement, some more passion, and I think that's something that Ten Hag hasn't really brought to United. I think if you don't bring that in the first few months, the first season at the club as a minimum, then it's a real recipe for disaster, and I think it just sort of stagnates. Even if it's not awful, I just think that stagnant atmosphere that there is at United at the moment is really spread throughout the club. And I don't think that's completely Ten Hag's fault. I think it's obviously his sort of style of play and maybe his like personality, I guess. I just it doesn't suit where Man United need to be to get back to where they were for me. So yeah, it probably would be Ten Hag's biggest problem, but I don't want that to undermine all of the other issues that are there as well, because they've obviously got to be dealt with still as well. Sacking Ten Hag isn't going to be a miracle cure. What do you see as what is United's biggest problem in your opinion?
I think the manager and the players at the moment are definitely 1 and 2. I think, but prior to Ineos coming in, I think you would have said the Glazers. But if it is to believe that they aren't in football in control anymore and it's fully on Ineos, then I'd say that, in terms of the player recruitment they did over the summer, I looked at all of those and I thought, do you know what, if they were to go to the rivals of Chelsea, maybe prior to Chelsea recent form, if I were to say maybe not Chelsea, but Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, I would have said, okay, they would have been fantastic additions, they would have done really well. And so that's always my biggest thing. I'm looking at Bruno Fernandes, who is being a bit silly, maybe even petulant, getting a few red cards at the moment, despite the fact that he's captain, he should be leading by example. I look at him and go, if he was a Manchester City, would he be producing De Bruyne-esque numbers? I mean, you can maybe make an argument for it, but you could definitely say he'd be in and around De Bruyne-esque numbers. So, yeah, I would say that it is the players and the manager at the moment. But it's only at Man United where you question the attitude of the players as well. Because for any other club, you go, okay, the players are giving their 100% and the manager needs to go. But it's only at United where you go, well, the players aren't giving 100%, let's get rid of them. And you go, hang on, no, but they are best players, let's get rid of, you can't get rid of them. And then you go, well, they're your best players, but not giving 100%. And then your players who aren't as good are giving 100%. And it's it's only at Man United at the moment, which makes it just weirder and weirder. And yeah, I think it's both. I'll be honest. I'm glad that Ten Hag was given this third season, not because I'm a rival fan and I'm enjoying the sweet sweet demise, because I am, but also from a football perspective, one good season his first season, one terrible season his second season. I wanted to know how this season would go, and then we can all say without a shadow of a doubt, okay, this is Erik Ten Hag, and I think we can now say that this is Erik Ten Hag, this is Salah football, it's rubbish, he's not good enough. And I think I can now say that with 100% conviction, whereas despite when they won the FA Cup, I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But now I'm like, okay, I can say it with my chest. And yeah, so therefore I'd say that, Ten Hag needs to go, but also a lot of these players who have probably got multiple managers sacked also need to go.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a positive that Ineos has brought in. I think if they would have got rid of him at the end of last season, it would have been potentially a gamble, because we have seen some good things from Ten Hag, and maybe in that third season, once it's fully settled in, things could have been better and they could have had a good start to the season. But I think giving him that third season and being able to make a more educated choice of whether to keep him for the sort of continuous future or to get rid of him at the end of the season, which I think is what it is going to be. I think they're going to be looking over this season, what manager can they bring in to replace him, and really make an informed decision, instead of just, oh, we're on a bad run of form, sack, bring in a new manager. Because I think long-term sustainability of a football club, that is a really, really bad model to have. And we look at the most successful teams in England at the moment, and we see how long the managers have been there. Looking at Pep, looking at Klopp, Arteta maybe not have won something, but the position that United are in and that Arsenal were in is very similar in the way that Arteta has brought them back into that conversation of trophies, at least. And I think even with clubs like Chelsea, I think you look at their most successful spells was when they at least gave their manager a few seasons as opposed to just one and dones. And I think that's something that Ineos are going to do. And I would be very surprised if he gets sacked throughout this season at all. But if the form carries on, I will not be surprised if he gets sacked at the end of next season and that they bring in the best manager that they can. And I think that is going to be something that hopefully will be a positive change for United, that it will be a more informed decision and something that's not just a quick plaster on it, that it's actually someone who's going to really, really fix sort of the deep issues at United and to give them time as well when they come in.
I tell you what, I'm not as confident as you are, just based on the fact that I think you need to have a bit of hope as a fan and you need to go, okay, what are we working towards and are we heading in that direction? And I think if Ten Hag were to stay, say, past Christmas, I'd just go, it's just a slow death. And I think it would be uninspiring for both the players and the fans themselves. I personally am of the opinion that I think after that Spurs game, I think it was clear that it was, okay, Ten Hag is not the manager Man United need. He needs to go. I would rather see them be proactive, sack him, not get rude until the end of the season. Because I think an interim manager, if you look at the top clubs, like you mentioned, how long have they ever had an interim manager? Just sack him and then make a decision. And so you can go into the rest of the season, still early on, with renewed optimism and hope. And then you can go, well, okay, we can still get top four. We can still maybe get a trophy this season. We're in the Europa League. I mean, prior to the Porto game, we were one of the favourites forward behind Spurs. And so I would sack him. I would sack Ten Hag, but I would also bring in someone immediately because I don't want to see Root to the end of the season because I think that's a cop-out and I think that's a convenient way to get out of actually making a decision.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think an interim is the right choice. I think it does make a big difference if a manager can come in with a full preseason, especially I think the manager of the caliber that they need to bring in. I think if they come in and it's still the same and they don't have that new manager bounce, and then it's looking at the end of the season like they're in the same position, and then there's question marks over the already new manager. I just feel like that's not going to be a good platform for that manager to be set up on. But like you said, it depends how badly things go for the rest of the season. It could get worse, which is very worrying, because there are some signs. Yeah, that Villa game, yeah, they defended well, but Villa weren't great. And I think if Villa played better, United could have potentially got battered again like they were against Spurs, and it could get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and Villa didn't even have their best midfield out there, and they still dominated Man United's midfield. So I think that has to say something as well. But we shall end the conversation there in terms of Manchester United, because it's now time for me to catch up Toby in the quiz.
Hell yes. After 6 rounds, I'm 3 points ahead on 15 points, and Mev is on 12. It is Guess the Club. We'll each be giving each other 5 players. The lesser amount of players that you need, the more points that you get. So, last week, I think I went first last week, did I not? Or did I go second? I honestly can't remember. I feel like I say this every week and I have no idea.
No, you went first last week. I then went second, and then I got 0, obviously.
Nice. Okay.
So I'm going to go first, because I need to make up some points.
Let's throw you in the deep end, and let's give you your first player for 5 points, which is Ryan Bertrand.
Ryan Bertrand, who started his career at Chelsea, went to play for Southampton. He's now, or was very recently, at Leicester. Which club do I want to eliminate? Because those are the 3 I can think of. He's definitely been on loan to a couple of places as well. So like, he might even be like a team in Germany or something. But I'm gonna say Chelsea.
It is not Chelsea, unfortunately.
Okay.
But, funnily enough, your next player for 4 points is Gary Cahill.
Okay, so I'm very glad I did say Chelsea, because Gary Cahill went Bolton to Chelsea, and I have no idea where he went afterwards. I think he might have done Aston Villa, and I don't think Ryan Bertrand was at Bolton, and I've said Chelsea, so Aston Villa.
And he's got it for 4 points.
Yes,
well done, mate. Cracking answer.
You definitely made it easier than last week.
Well, to be honest, I can't remember if Cahill was there after Chelsea, but I put him on this list because he was there from 2000 to 2008, before he was even at Bolton. He was there for 8 years, and I saw that, and I thought, I had absolutely no idea, so I'm going to throw him in as a second player. And maybe if he went back there after Chelsea, that was a bit easy for a second player, but you still did great with that answer, mate. Yeah, Bertrand was there on loan as well. So 4 points for yourself, Mev.
Nice. Who were the other players you're going to give me?
So it would have been Stuart Downing 3rd.
Okay.
Gareth Barry 4th, and Christian Benteke 5th.
Yeah, I think that was slightly on the easy side. You definitely have helped me out after my no points last week. So I will say thank you very much, mate.
You shouldn't have said that, mate, because I'll be making it super tough next week now.
Well, I think it's when it's all Premier League sides, and they're all like established Premier League players who've been around for a bit. Yeah.
Nice. 4 points though, mate. Smashed it.
Thank you very much, mate. Let's see how well you do. I think you may struggle, but you may also have a chance of doing this quite well. I think this is going to be interesting. Are you ready?
Let's see. Yeah, let's get into it.
Your first player for 5 points is Lyle Foster.
Lyle Foster. Okay, I think the only side I'm pretty sure I know he's played for is Burnley, but it's not going to be him, so it just feels not going to be them, so it just feels like a wasted guess, really. Lyle Foster. Let's think of a Championship Premier League side. Let's throw out a cheeky bit of Birmingham City.
It is not Birmingham City, unfortunately. So your second player for 4 points is Sergio Romero.
Sergio Romero. Okay, if I think who that is, that's the Argentinian keeper. Where was he at? He was at United. Who was he at before and after? I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm pretty sure. Let's rattle the old brain. could be anywhere in Europe. Yeah, I have no inkling. Maybe played in the Portuguese league. I'll keep that in the back of my mind. But I'm going to go for United for now.
It is not Man United, unfortunately. So your third player for 3 points is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang.
Okay, this is a lot better. Okay. So let's run through his clubs. So he started at AC Milan. He then was at Monaco, St Etienne. St Etienne to Dortmund. Oh my god, there's so many. To Arsenal. To Chelsea. To Barca. And he's now at a Saudi club. Might be missing a couple clubs in there, but that's the main. So it's the third one, so it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I'm thinking either Monaco or St Etienne. Let's go for Monaco.
Oh, he's good, isn't he? He's got it in 3.
Yes, love that.
Oh.
That was just Aubameyang, pure Aubameyang.
I knew you were going to know his career path, so I was like, okay, I've got to give you, a few throw-offs. I didn't think you'd get Lyle Foster, but yeah, fair enough, mate. Fair enough, well played.
Take a 3. Who were the other two going to be?
It was then going to be João Moutinho, because I thought I made the first 3 a bit too easy, and then the last one would have been Kylian Mbappe.
And nice.
There's no way Lyle Foster has played for PSG or Real Madrid. So.
Not yet.
Not yet. I mean, he is. I want to say he's still in his mid to early 20s. So this, you never know.
There's always a chance. Lyle Foster and Mbappe up front together.
Oh
if
my god!
Hosselu's been there. Hosselu of Stoke passed.
Yeah,
with Foster of Burnley passed.
It's true. I think Real Madrid could probably do with Hosselu at the moment. They've not been doing too well in the league. So yeah, well played, mate.
Big man back.
So what are the scores now?
So it is now 18 to me, 16 to you. So it's reduced to a 2-point deficit. 7 rounds played, so 3 to go.
Yes. Yeah, you did really, really well there, mate. Well done. God, I'm annoyed with you. But yeah. But that is it for this week's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast. If you enjoyed us, please give us a like on the video. Please subscribe so you stay up to date with all of our recent uploads. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.